What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I'm going to talk about how my experiences in California Department of Corrections over close to 10 years kind of made me racist, man. Or at least much closer to that than as a kid I would have ever imagined. And I'll run through some specific situations and even a situation that I got into years after I've been home from prison that could have went real bad, and really highlighted how I, in fact, had not left some of those old attitudes, so to speak, to the past, right? Before that, let me address real quick. Yes, I'm wearing my Welga Bird shirt, right? And it's intentional for this video. Uh, but whenever I wear it, I get a couple comments, right? Of oh, Rascal, you think you're a gang member. I knew you were a gang member, right? And no, I'm not. I am 47 years old, and I say that often because I'm proud of it. I never thought as a kid that I'd make it this far. And I really don't care where people are from. I don't like people or dislike people because of where they're from. And I don't have a problem with or feel threatened by anybody else being proud of where they're from. I actually think that's pretty normal. And the other one I get is, oh, you're trying to look active. You wish you were still active. That's another silly one. Look, if I wanted to still be in the mix, I would be. And I don't say that arrogantly. I don't know that my career would have lasted, all this long. But I didn't get pushed out. I didn't drop out. I didn't get dirty politics or get stabbed or any of that stuff, right? I'm not putting down people who have, it's just not my that's not my story. Right. So if if I wanted to stay in the mix, I would have stayed in the mix back then. And there's a lot of things I've done in my life that I'm not proud of. Coming home from prison and saying, man, I wonder if I can make a life out here that doesn't involve going back to prison, is not one of them. That is not something that I'm ashamed of, at all. But I do think it helped me make a better visual for this video. It kind of goes along with the topic, and then also on Rascal Reacts, there's the shameless plug. I'm going to be doing a video later on today about something that Cholo Juan went through, right, on a podcast he was on recently. And I also think the shirt ties into that, right? It's going to be a part of that spiel. So if you haven't checked out Rascal Reacts, I encourage you, of course, to do so. Up past 4,000 subscribers now, so incredibly, appreciative for that. And that's where I've been spending a lot of time lately. But I'm not going to ignore the Homie Hangout, right? So anyways, to the topic, right? Like I said, I'm 47. I'm from San Francisco originally, not the Mission District, or from Visitation Valley, which is right on the border of Sunnydale, and but I'm all through the Bay, right? I grew up all through the Bay Area. I did a lot of juvenile time and group homes and foster care, all kinds of stuff out there. And so I moved around a lot, but always within kind of the urban Bay Area, and always in low income areas. Right? And when I was a kid, race wasn't a factor for us. And I don't mean to say that we didn't see color. I think that's a silly statement. Everybody, unless you're colorblind, sees color. But we talked about it, right? We clowned about it. Those are the main things you get teased for. What you look like, your race, your religion, languages, where your family's from, skin color, like all that stuff was a main part of our dialogue back and forth. Basically, all the taboo shit that you're not supposed to talk about when you talk about people, we said all that back and forth, all day, every day. But I wasn't conditioned to dislike any group for what they look like. The only group as a whole that I was conditioned to hate was Southsiders. And Southsiders of any race didn't matter, but was them. We would fight other groups. We fought other Northerners. We fought the Brothers, and Crips, and Skaters, and everybody was fighting everybody. But none of those conflicts meant, oh, I just hate everybody that looks like them. So that was my world growing up, and that's how it was in juvenile hall for me. That's how it was everywhere. So when I come to the county jail, I get arrested in Contra Costa County. I had been living out there for a couple of years. I was 19 years old, caught an attempted murder out of Pittsburgh. And the whole Coco County experience is deserving of a video on its own. So I won't get a lot into it here, but that was the first place that I got pressed, because, I just looked like the straight white guy, and I was a Northern. And it was my first day in there, and this wood comes up, and he had all the war bird and the swastika Nazi, all the shit, right? Had all the shit, and he came up to me and he was looking kind of aggressive, and he wasn't the first person I talked to, but he was the first person I fired on, and he says, hey man, what are you? Right? All tough guy is. And I was like, I'm a Norteno, 150 pounds, 19 years old. And he said, man, no, you're not. And before he can get the word not out, I was on his snot box. Bing. And not because I was a tough guy, right? I was violent, but more out of fear. I let this dude get the best of me. So, anyways, that's a story for another day. But that set a tone, and there's a lot of woods in Coco County that are not like that. Um, it's even a lot of the woods up in Northern California, the Bay Area, at least. Their old ladies are Mexican. They got kids. They're cool with Northerners. It's not a real racist type of vibe, at least that I experienced and saw. And again, clowning and joking, and I still got family to this day that just calls me the güero, right? But so that came up, but never in a like questioning who I was, or who I ran with, or any of that, until I went to jail. So then I go to prison, and well, actually in Quentin, and I talked about this, I think, when I did the San Quentin video, but I'm walking down the tier, coming back from Chow, my first walk to Chow, and my cellies ahead of me, and I'm meeting kind of some of the homeboys, and people are standing in front of their cells, and there's a wood there, right? Oh, white dude, tattoos, whatever, and he sees me walking, he's like, "Hey man, how you doing? You good?" Something like that, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." Respectful, right? Just kept it pushing, didn't stop and talk to him, I'm just being respectful. And when I get back to the cell, my cellie's like, "Hey, fool, don't fuck with those dudes. Like, don't talk to them." And he thought you were one of them. Fool, you ain't one of them. You're one of us. And you need to put these people in line. And so again, it kind of threw me off. And for those that don't know, in the California system, at least in the time period I'm talking about, right, 96 to 2005, um, Northerners and blacks kicked it on one side of the yard. Southerners and whites kicked it on the other. And we had a generally good relationship with the brothers, just like the Southsiders had a generally good relationship with the Woods. The term ally and stuff gets thrown around, and that gets a little bit more complicated, but in general, we coexisted more closely together, just like Southerners and whites coexisted more closely together over in their area. And so I go to prison, right? I'm in Solano. It's my first main line, Solano level 3. And I'm not gonna run through every scenario, but I'm gonna point out some highlights. And a few things came to mind there, right? A few things I learned. One was a lot of the white dudes had a different style than us. Learn the term biker status. And if you've been to prison in California, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't come up with the shit. But if a homeboy came out for chow and his shirt was kind of wrinkled, or you see a little dust bunny by his door, you're like, damn, fool, you on biker status or what? Not saying all bikers are dirty, just saying that was the stereotype, that was the language, right? And I would see the Woods, and a lot of them were sex playing and grabbing ass, and hygiene not really up to par. And for a lot of us, like when it comes to the personal hygiene stuff, and I think this is just as true for Southsiders, right? That shit was important even on the streets. Looking sharp, creased up. Clothes weren't always expensive. We weren't into fashion, so to speak, at the time, but for a lot of us weren't. But nevertheless, when your clothes look, they look sharp, they look clean, and so just different culture, right? Coming from a different space. And there was a few homeboys that would come through that didn't have the best hygiene habits, but they learned real quick that was non-negotiable. So just seeing their get down, and how they talk to each other, and like I said, the sex play, and the Northerners can't sex play. You can't even sex play in the cell. Your cellie come out and tell his channel, and you wind up getting in trouble. And I know the Southsiders are pretty similar, from my experience at least of seeing them, and from what I've heard. So they just had a different get down. Dudes be laying on the grass with no shoes on, and I know some of this is because it's a level 3, right? I was on a level 4. It did look a little different over there, but that's where I started to look and realize, like, these dudes got a different program, and I never fought to claim wood in prison. I could have, right? There was nothing stopping me. Um, but it never considered it. It was never an option for me. I've been a Norteno all my life, and so why would I go to prison and change that, right? Or not be that? I know some people who have, you know, and teach their own. That's their own stories, and that's fine. But for me, it it was, never an option. But I would look at how the Woods would program, and I'd be like, damn, fool, I'm on the right team. Like I couldn't live with these dudes. I couldn't endure that type of existence, the lack of discipline and just all the shit, man. And I'm not saying, just it should be clear, but I'm not saying that this is true for all white dudes that have done time in California, or even that it was true for every white dude on that yard. I'm making generalizations and I'm using stereotypes, but rooted in what I observed and my own experiences, because generalizations, and stereotypes is a lot of times what racism and prejudice is born out of to begin with. So don't come hit me with the not all these people, not all those people. That's not what this is about, But I have been asked countless times since I came on YouTube, right? What's it like being a white northerner? What's it like being a mixed northerner or a light skinned northerner? However people want to put it, right? Um, how do they treat you, and was there issues, and did you feel like you had to prove yourself more, and did you have to prove yourself in the streets? And I will say, on the streets, I never felt I had to prove myself more because of what I looked like. I always felt I had to prove myself because I was representing something, and I was with other people oftentimes, right? I'm with my homeboys. And so, yeah, I always have something to prove, but it's because I was a gang member, not because I was a gang member that looked the way I looked, right? So, anyway, I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, these dudes is foul, bro. Like I couldn't hack it, right? Not at all. And then another situation, I think I've mentioned this before. There was a dude from Sacramento, right? He was a Sacramaniac, had the keys to the yard over the Sacramento white guys. And I remember their little item of clothing they would use was, there was these trucker hats that were like yellow on the front, right? They were white, but they had yellow on the front. I think maybe even the bill was yellow. And I guess you get them on canteen, so I don't know where the fuck they came from, to be honest. But all the Sacramaniac dudes wore those hats, right? A lot of them were dirty, but all of them wore those hats. So, anyways, this cat Hot Rod, had the keys for them at the time, and he, just like a lot of Woods in prison, they had all those tattoos that I'm talking about, right? All the symbols and the German shit, all the shit. But he also had Irish pride tattooed on his lower back. And I saw him one day in the day room from my cell, and he was reading like a big old Irish history book. And then he comes out. It was days after that, but at some point later, he winds up getting at his people and requires them all to cover up their swastika, right? And had to cover it up with something, because he learned that in reality, the real Nazis would not have accepted you as an Irish person. Like, that was funk, and you would not have been one of the cool kids in the club, right? But he didn't know that. He learned that, and while I got respect for him over that, it almost made me. It not almost. I lost a little bit of respect for this whole white supremacist narrative and imagery that gets put up in prison by a lot of Woods. I actually kind of lost respect for him because I was like, damn, for you look like you're so committed to these beliefs. But then you read a book and realize that your beliefs are not rooted in anything fucking historical, and you're not actually the supreme guy according to the folks that kill people to be supreme guys. And then you totally switch up, but you still rock with your shit though. And I get it. It's something that I've thought about. I'm kind of a student of history. I just like to learn in general. I'm really a nerd, man. But um, and so I know, and I think that's honestly where a lot of this white supremacy in the United States stuff comes from, is because they see every other racial group um, be able to attach themselves to some type of indigenous history, right? And and the whether it's the Aztecs and the Mayans, or it's in Africa, or Asians. Everybody can attach themselves to some ethnic historical lineage, but whiteness in the United States has become this umbrella term for a bunch of people whose ancestors a oftentimes didn't get along, and b come from very diverse places with very diverse histories, but that diversity is kind of wiped out here, and it's just whiteness. And I think that's what attracts some people to that narrative in particular in prison, is you want to attach yourself to some historical roots, and yet they've been kind of robbed of any knowledge of their historical roots, right? And you're just a white guy, and your roots go back as the founding of America. And so anyway, that's probably a whole nother video. But so I looked at them then like, man, you guys ain't really standing on business, right? And even though I think they made the better move from just a social standpoint, and that's because as a northerner, I was full in the mix, right? Not saying I was a tough guy or anything else, but I was absolutely committed, and was committed to learning and doing and being. And while I didn't see myself as better than anybody else, I absolutely believe that the Norteño program was the program, right? Like that was the elite program. That was a program that not a lot of people could do, right? And it had the most discipline and this beautiful movement with this rich history and all this other stuff, right? And I was full fledged into that, right? And so coming from that mindset and viewing myself that way and viewing my group that way, then I'm looking at this group like, you guys are some fucking clowns. And again, things would change. I wound up getting into it with the Woods in Solano. That was actually my only physical confrontation in prison, with the whites, but wound up getting into it with them, and that's because this NLR dude came, and he got them all ruffled up, and he just looked like a white Southsider, a big ass white Southsider, but a white Southsider. And then I even learned the name, and I thought it was a joke at first, and was like, you can't be serious. Like that's about as ridiculous as the dudes on the SNY side call themselves BBC, right? Like just man, you got to rethink this better. But he was sharp, creased up, clean, hygiene up to par, mannerisms and all that stuff. He was elite in that sense, right? But he was way more on the bullshit than a lot of these Woods were too. Hence them hanging out on our side of the yard and me telling them that you probably want to do your business over there with your people, and that getting blown out of proportion into a conflict when that had happened a dozen times before that, and nobody had tripped. It was common courtesy, bro. Like, you don't belong over here, homie. Do it moving. And so, anyways, there's a bunch of little side stories in here, and I don't want to make this an hour long video, but so these different little things kind of impacted my view, and then I go to Salinas Valley, and you don't see white dudes hanging out in the yard with no shoes on. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot more disciplined environment, and I think that has to do with the fact that it's a level 4 yard. But a lot of it's still kind of weird shit, right? And nowhere in this do I mean that the Woods were punked. The most vicious stabbing I ever saw in prison was in Salinas Valley, and it was a white dude stabbing another white dude. It's just, it left me thinking some type of way. And when I pulled up to Salinas, I got followed by some Woods, right? And they were like, "What's up, Wood? What's up, Wood?" And I just ignored them. It wasn't the first time that somebody had made a mistake. So I ignored them, but they kept going, and they had like a chip on their shoulder. And so finally I was like, "Ain't no fucking Wood, huh? Well, what are you?" And then they looked mad, like, and I was like, "Mama Norteño." "Oh, well, we think you're moving into a white cell. What are you gonna do? You going to white cell?" And just again, just behaving in ways that we, right, as Northerners, um, just didn't get down and didn't behave. And since I already had kind of this chip on my shoulder, and I can tell that they had a chip on the shoulder with me, all these little instances just kind of fed into that, right? Fed into that. And it was just different, man. It was weird, and I think probably a lot of the woods that I did get that vibe from and got into it within prison were probably from Southern California. Because just in general, even from watching from outside, the more like really on that, you know, supremacy shit, a lot of those dudes tend to come from Southern California or from way north rural California where they ain't never even seen nobody with a tan until they came to prison. So, of course they think that way. But anyway, so that, that was it. That was through my time, and it's a trip because like I said, I came into prison conditioned to hate Southsiders. Yet my time in prison caused those walls to kind of get cracked a little bit, right? And this is way before into hostilities. We were very much on different teams. Everybody knew where they stood, but I saw a lot more similarities with them, and there's differences, of course, but I saw more similarities. And Southsiders never talked to me crazy in prison. They never looked at me crazy in prison, right? And not because I'm some fucking imposing tough guy, it's they conducted themselves for the most part like Northerners conducted themselves, right? Courteously, respectful, and will blast the shit out of you if it comes down to it. But up until then, we'll be polite and respectful. And they kept their areas clean. They had some discipline, like so. It was a trip that going through prison, the group I went into prison to hate. Uh, Again, I wouldn't say I came to like at that stage. I wouldn't say I came to like Southsiders. We was rivals. We was rivals. But I came to have a respect for them that I had nothing of, when I went in there, and start again to see similarities. I was in the Pelican Bay SHU for years, and in my section was a dude from Northern California downstairs, and every other cell was dudes from Southern California, and most of them were those dudes, right? And were very clear about it. It's very obvious, tattoos, the whole nine. And some of them pop up in videos that people make when they talk about, when they talk about those guys, they're household names in that half of the state, right? And we're super respectful and courteous, and it changed my view on them. But prison, I didn't go into prison feeling any type of way about white people or anybody else. But prison sure changed that. And there's gonna be some who are gonna say, well, what about the brothers? How come, you're not saying this video about the black? How come you weren't gonna get racist about the blacks? Because within the blacks, they're a fractured car, and some of those brothers don't take care of themselves and act certain ways and this and all that is true. All that's fucking true. I think the difference is uh I never felt on the streets or in prison, uh no brothers was ever pressed me, right? Ever looked at me sideways, you know? We our groups had a mutually respectful relationship. Plus, I had a familiarity uh, from the streets, right? I grew up around predominantly black and brown folks with some polys and some Asians and some white folks sprinkled in here and there. So I was familiar to them. They were familiar with me, and there was no issues in prison, and they never seemed like they had a dislike of me. I think that's the difference when it comes to the woods, right? Um, and it's just it is what it is, right? They have their own program. So fast forward, and I come home from prison, and I'm on high alert, right? You gain a level of awareness in prison that will make you go crazy if you try to maintain that out here on the street. It's just not sustainable for a long time because there's a lot more to observe out here. We don't have cars driving around and women and children and regular people and affiliates, and we don't have all that shit in prison, right? So it I'm walking around, I'm on high alert, and I noticed that who I'm really checking for, right? And I'm paroled to Concord. So I'm in Contra Costa County. And I ran across some woods when I was out there, and it was cool, right? But it a little bit of a barrier there, and that barrier is probably more on my part because in the streets there's not a lot of wood. Like I said, in the Bay Area, at least the more urban parts of it, there ain't a whole lot of woods pushing that agenda on the streets. Not back then, not that I saw, right? In the late '80s and the '90s, no. But I was, because of my experiences in prison, I was reserved. Like you never know, and I tripped more off them than I did off of Southside. Right? I'd see a white dude in the grocery store, and he looks, he's got some tattoos, looks like they're prison tattoos, and I got my eye on him, like those are the ops. And and yet I'm over on Monument where there's Southsiders, if anybody's familiar with Concord, and I see little Southsiders, and I was like, look at these, dudes out here doing their shit, right? Or on their thing. They still here, huh? Okay. And so it was weird. I mean, I didn't come home banging, but how much my mindset had shifted in this time. And then the incident I'm gonna talk about, and then I'll wrap this up. This was just a handful of years ago, right? After I had actually already started on YouTube, or at least I was watching. I think, yeah, I don't know 100% if I had a channel or not, but I had started watching YouTube, and I was at the hospital. I was staying in Sacramento area, right? I was separated from my kid's mom already, and my daughter had to go to. In fact, I did have a channel, but my daughter had to go to the hospital, right? One of my daughters, and so we're at this hospital, and she had to get transferred out somewhere else. So we're up like maybe Roseville or something. I forget exactly. We were there all night. It was a lot, but this is during the virus, right? So you could only have one parent in the room at a time. The other parent had to wait out in the car. But once she went in to get her procedure, there was a waiting room out there that both parents could wait there. It wasn't. It was social distance because it was a huge room and a very very small number of people there. So we were both able to be inside at the same time to be able to see her for a minute when she first was waking up. So I'm in this room, and like I said, it's a large room, and we got to take an elevator up to where she's at, but it's all locked off, closed off. It's the vid, Holmes. It was all secure. And so I'm in there with my kid's mom, and I see this dude, right? And he looks like me, might even been a little bit lighter than me. Razor bald head. I shave my head, but I don't use a razor. And I use clippers, right? So he shaved his head with a razor, and I could see some tattoos on her neck, but he was wearing a leather jacket, some jeans that fit, and like some pointed shoes. I wasn't sure if they were boots or not. But so I'm watching, and he's way across the way, and he's not facing me. And I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to see tattoos, and this is like I said, just a few years ago, right? I paroled in December 9th, 2005, but I'm looking and I'm trying to get a read on who he runs with. Not because I'm banging, not because I have any intention on pressing him. I have no intention of starting a conflict with anybody. I never go outside with that intention, right? Um, but for my own security, I'm trying to know. Because then if this dude sees me, is he going to come up to me? There is a history of Northerners and Woods getting into it. There's a history of me getting into it with Woods. So I'm like, you just never know. And I felt like it was a very untrustworthy, potentially, troublesome situation. So I'm checking and I'm looking. I'm like, man, but I'm not trying to like mean mug the fool because I don't want to instigate. I don't want to give him a reason to act some type of way that I'm gonna act some type of way and it's gonna go up, right? But so I'm looking and I'm looking away, doing my thing, and then I catch him kind of looking, but I can't really see his face. I was like, what? Then they call us, right? They say, hey, you guys, your kids are out. So we go walking towards this elevator, and my ex was already kind of on me, like, man, why you keep pressing that dude? Why you tripping off that dude? Do you know that dude? And so I was like, just relax, just trying to figure out who's in the room. That's all. And so we go walking, and we gotta go around to the corner. And he, comes around the corner, gets by the elevator, and at this point now, I can see him. My vision ain't the best anyways, but now I can see him, and I'm like, that looks familiar. And I look down, and we had stickers, little visitor stickers with your name on it. And I look and I see the sticker, and I was like, hey, are you so and so? Who it was Biggie, right? I used the name that we knew each other by in prison. We were neighbors in the Pelican Bay Shoe for a long time. He is from the north, right? To put it mildly. We were both validated at the same time back there. We was neighbors. We talked, very often for years through the door, all that shit. And I hadn't seen him since we were last in prison. He paroled right after me, but we never crossed paths in the streets. But he had this YouTube channel called The Working Ex-Con, right? And he starts a channel. He don't really post too much, but so I consider him a friend. Like he was my homie from prison, but it was cool to see him, and and since then we've hung out a bunch. I've been at his house, been around his family, everything else. His family is not a white family, right? But that's just how he looks, and very much with the activities, they very much on behalf of the homeboys. And so I see, but I called him by that name, right? Which he doesn't use that on here, so I'm not gonna use it. I don't think it's a big fucking secret, but he goes by Biggie, so we'll say Biggie. And he looks, rascal, like man. And we shake hands and we hug, man, like two long lost homeboys that ain't seen each other in years because that's what we are. And I was like, oh, bro, I'm about to fucking get you. I thought you was one of them, right? And he's like, man, I was trying to, basically he was doing the same thing. Like I was trying to check for you. Like I've seen the tattoos, but I couldn't make them out from there. And I was like, man, who is this fool? And part of it was the looking kind of familiar. Something familiar about this guy, but I can't place it. And that can be dangerous. That can be dangerous because if you don't remember why somebody's familiar, you may be reminded and it may not be nice. So both of us were on the same type of time. We both had a laugh about it. But it showed me like, damn, bro, I'm all these years later and I still got a chip on my shoulder. Now, I do what I got to do to protect my environment and to secure myself. I don't walk around with the same level of heightened awareness as I did in prison. That it's like I said, it's not sustainable, right? Got enough mental health issues already. I add to it, but I did, man. I had to check myself, and him and I actually had a conversation about it after that, and I was like, "Fool, this is wild, and it's not reasonable. It's not realistic, right? It's not legitimate, you know, because I have since I've been home from prison, I've talked to a bunch of white dudes that did time, and said I'm seen a dude at college, right? That was from Southern California. He's a white dude. He's like Polish or something, but he's from Southern California, and he grew up a Southsider. Was in his neighborhood the whole nine, Southsidered out, right? It was he was with the shit. He's in YA, and at some point in YA, they decide he can't be a Southsider, and they pack him out, right? Because he's a white guy, and maybe there's more to it. I don't know. That's his story that he's telling me. I don't think it really matters. They pack him out, and he gets dropped level or whatever. However that shit works for him. And so he later on winds up going to prison, and he runs wood in prison. And I remember telling him when he was telling me this, man, how was that? Like you're a Southsider, now you gotta go to prison. You're around all these woods, talking all racist all the time, and all this other stuff, which I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating that they're just using racial slurs constantly when they talk. Probably not, but in my mind, since I'm already hating on them, basically, that's where I'm at. And he's like, oh no, bro, weird. I jumped full in. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I bit into that mentality as well. I was like, well, this is weird, but I'll talk to white dudes that have done time, and some of them are good friends, right? And white dudes that weren't racist in the streets and didn't push a racist agenda in prison, but you gotta go with the flow. You're not gonna change the program. Nobody's bigger than the program, right? So they went to the joint and they rock with their people and they did what they had to do to endure that world. And honestly, from a no pun intended, but from a convict's perspective, I it's not my place to fault anybody for doing what they got to do to survive an environment that we weren't made to survive, man. To each their own. You all got to figure out your own way, just like I did, right? And so, so they did it, right? And others that were very much on that hype, right? Who now are not, and maybe because they matured, just like I'm not on the same hype I was, in terms of all that stuff and the movement and the cause and the agenda I don't think the same now, right? We get older, we think better, and and so I'm not on that page, and so some of these dudes aren't either. And I really think I'm much more past that now. But again, I've been asked this question a lot, and so I wanted to kind of answer it. Shout out Joey, right? Joey, free from Fetters Grove. Uh, our national politics stuff sometimes we don't necessarily see eye to eye, but he has a YouTube channel. I'd encourage you guys to check it out. And Joey did time in California as a would. Right, it's not my place to tell his story, but I haven't met him in person. I don't know him personally, but we have great conversations. I respect his get down. I think he's a hardworking family man. I don't think he's on whatever type of time he needed to be on in prison. I don't feel like he's on that time now, and he treats me with the utmost respect and shows me love, and I do the same. And I like that. Like, it's cool for me, you know, um, to be able to do that, and it's cool of him to do that because I'm sure we haven't really talked about it, but I'm sure I'm gonna send him this video though that he had some similar thoughts about Northerners, had similar thoughts about Northerners that have any white blood in them, running with the North or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but knowing the environment, prison teaches you to hate. It teaches you to manipulate. It teaches you to get divided and split up. If you didn't have that stuff in you when you went in there, you're either gonna learn that and get on that page and find where you fit in, or you're gonna get rolled the fuck over. That's just the reality of it. That's how it was at least. And everybody, like I said, got to figure out their role. So, shout out. There's a lot of white dudes that watch this channel. And I appreciate them, and I appreciate their feedback, and got no issue with them. And racist is probably a strong term, because it wasn't like I just came out hating white people, but having a chip on my shoulder and being very judgmental about particularly white men that have been to the joint or look like they kicked with people that have been to the joint between the ages of like 20 and 50, right? Yeah. And again, very judgmental, making assumptions about people. It would run across folks. Oh yeah, man, I was in prison and I automatically now think of you a certain way just because I'm looking at your skin color. Right. And that's, it's crazy. It's crazy for anybody to do. It doesn't fit. Just because somebody says they were this in prison doesn't mean you know how they're gonna act, right? Anyways, I can go on and on, but it's not a live; it's actually a video. So let me cut this a little bit, shorter, I guess, than it could be. But anyways, man, shout out the Woods, shout out all the solid white people, that have shown me love. Those that haven't shown me love, that's fine too. And again, it's based on stereotypes, but that's where hate comes from. Hate comes from stereotypes and stigmas and all that shit, right? Limited interactions and not knowing but making assumptions, which is what I did all the time because I'm looking at a group I'm not a part of. I'm not in that group. And they're looking at me the same fucking way. So, anyways, man, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. Please subscribe to Rascal Reacts. I'd really appreciate it. Give me your feedback. This channel is not all about prison and prison content. The reaction channel is not all about that either. But, but I know that's what how you guys like to watch, and it's been a while since I posted. And so, anyways, you guys take care, man. I appreciate you.